Close your eyes for a moment. Not to sleep. Just to pause. Think about this simple question. How do you know that anything you experience is real? The sound of this voice. The screen in front of you. The idea that tomorrow will come after today. You've never proved these things. You simply assume them. And for centuries, philosophers argued over whether those assumptions were justified at all. Some believed the mind discovers truth through pure reason. Others believed all knowledge comes from experience. But both sides were stuck. And that deadlock became philosophy's most impossible problem. Until one man changed the question completely. His name was Immanuel Kant. 1. The problem that nearly destroyed philosophy. By the 18th century, philosophy was in crisis. On one side were the rationalists, thinkers like Descartes and Leibniz. They believed reason is the source of true knowledge. The mind contains innate ideas. Mathematics and logic reveal reality as it really is. On the other side were the empiricists, Locke, Berkeley, and most dangerously, David Hume. They believed the mind starts as a blank slate. All knowledge comes from experience. If you can't observe it, you can't truly know it. At first, this sounded reasonable. But Hume took empiricism to its logical conclusion. And what he discovered terrified philosophers. 2. Hume's bombshell. David Hume asked a simple question. Why do we believe that the future will resemble the past? Why do we think fire will burn tomorrow just because it burned yesterday? We say, because it always has. But that's not a logical proof. That's habit. Hume showed that cause and effect, the backbone of science, cannot be logically justified through experience alone. We never see causation. We only see events happening one after another. And yet we believe causation exists. Why? Not because of reason. Not because of observation. But because the mind expects it. This led to a terrifying conclusion. If Hume was right, then science has no rational foundation. Certainty is an illusion. Knowledge collapses into probability and habit. Kant later said, Hume awakened me from my dogmatic slumber. And that awakening changed philosophy forever. 3. Kant's radical move. Most philosophers tried to answer Hume by defending reason or experience. Kant did something far more radical. He asked, what if the problem isn't with knowledge, but with the way we ask about knowledge? Instead of asking, how does the mind match the world? Kant asked, how must the mind be structured for experience itself to be possible? This was his Copernican revolution in philosophy. Just as Copernicus showed that the earth revolves around the sun, not the other way around. Kant suggested that objects conform to the mind, not the mind to objects. That idea sounds shocking. But it explains everything. 4. The mind is not passive. Before Kant, philosophers assumed the mind was like a mirror. The world sends information in. The mind reflects it. Kant rejected this completely. He argued, the mind is active. It doesn't just receive experience. It organizes experience. Without the mind structure, raw sensory data would be meaningless, a chaotic flood of colors, sounds, and sensations. Experience itself would be impossible. So Kant asked, what must the mind already possess for experience to make sense at all? 5. Space and time are not out there. Here is one of Kant's most revolutionary claims. Space and time are not properties of the external world. They are forms of human perception. That doesn't mean space and time are fake. It means they are conditions of experience. You never experience anything outside space. You never experience anything outside time. Why? Because your mind organizes all perception spatially and temporally. You don't learn space and time from experience. You bring them to experience. They are the lenses through which reality appears to you. 6. Phenomena versus noumena. This leads to Kant's famous distinction. Phenomena, the world as it appears to us. Noumena, the world as it is in itself. We can never access the noumenal world directly. Not because it doesn't exist, but because all knowledge is filtered through the structures of the mind. This wasn't skepticism. It was a boundary. Kant wasn't saying, nothing is real. He was saying, human knowledge has limits, and those limits are what make knowledge possible. 7. The categories of understanding. Beyond space and time, Kant argued that the mind uses built-in concepts to organize experience. He called these the categories of understanding. They include ideas like causality, unity, plurality, necessity, substance. You don't discover causality by observing the world. You apply causality to experience so that events make sense at all. Without these categories, perception would be unintelligible. The world wouldn't appear as a world. 8. Synthetic a priori knowledge. This is where Kant solved the impossible problem. He introduced a new type of knowledge. Synthetic a priori knowledge. Let's break that down. A priori, knowledge independent of experience. Synthetic, knowledge that adds new information. Before Kant, philosophers believed knowledge had to be either analytic a priori, true by definition, like math. Synthetic a posteriori, true through experience. Kant showed there is a third category. Example. Every event has a cause. This is not true by definition. And it is not learned from experience. It is a necessary condition for experience itself. That's how science becomes possible again. How Kant saved science. Hume said causation cannot be justified. Kant replied, causation is not learned from the world. It is imposed by the mind. Therefore, science doesn't describe reality as it is in itself. Science describes reality as it must appear to a human knower. And that's enough. Certainty doesn't come from matching an external world perfectly. It comes from understanding the conditions under which knowledge is possible. Freedom, God, and morality. Kant didn't stop at knowledge. He knew that if humans were trapped in causality, freedom would be impossible. So he drew another boundary. In the phenomenal world, everything follows cause and effect. But freedom belongs to the noumenal realm. We cannot prove freedom scientifically. But we must assume it morally. The same applies to God, the soul, moral responsibility. These are not objects of knowledge. They are postulates of practical reason. They guide action, not theory. Why Kant matters today. Modern science, psychology, and cognitive science echo Kant's insight. We now know. Perception is constructed. The brain actively interprets data. Reality is filtered through mental frameworks. Kant anticipated this centuries ago. He didn't destroy truth. He redefined it. Truth is not a mirror of reality. It is the result of structured experience. The price of Kant's solution. Kant's solution came at a cost. We must accept. We will never know things as they are in themselves. Metaphysical certainty has limits. Human knowledge is powerful but bounded. But those limits are not a weakness. They are the foundation of meaning. The final insight. Kant showed that the most impossible problem in philosophy was impossible only because it was misunderstood. We don't need certainty beyond human experience. We need clarity about how experience works. And once we understand that, the world becomes intelligible again. So the next time you trust that the sun will rise, that causes have effects, that your experiences form a coherent world, remember, that order does not come from the universe alone. It comes from you. And that is Kant's legacy.